Welcome to Beyond the Book. I'm your host, JoAnn Dickinson, and today I am so excited to be talking to Travis Peterson, self-published author, designer, and author coach. Travis is the author of Ada and the Helpers, a story inspired by his daughter that brings awareness to hearing loss and sign language, and Never Ever Build a Blanket Fort, a playful adventure rooted in the biblical armor of God. He's also passionate about helping other indie authors through design, coaching, and his upcoming guide, The Indie Author's Dozen. Dozen is the key there for everybody listening. Travis, welcome. And I'm so glad to have you here all the way from Norway. So go ahead and share some information about us. How did you get to Norway? A little bit of your background.
Thank you so much, JoAnn. So I am from Wilmington, North Carolina, right on the coast, Hurricane Alley it's called. And I moved to Hawaii as a graphic designer to be part of a missions organization there. That was in 2011, and met my soon-to-be wife there. And she's from Norway. We were there for a couple of years and got married in Wilmington, lived outside of Atlanta for a few years before moving to Norway so that I could get to know her culture a little bit and learn her language and get to know her family more and that sort of thing. And we've been here now for 8 years. And so it's been a journey for sure. We have two small children. Well, I say small, they're getting bigger. Eden is 10 years old, and his sister Esther is 7 years old. And we'll be talking about both of those a little bit during this talk.
Great. I am excited about, obviously, the first book is about your son and hearing loss. That's a narrow niche, and I think you're in your own lane, Travis. Let's start with your first book, Ada and the Helpers, inspired by your daughter.
This is inspired by Esther.
Can you share the heart behind this story and how it helps raise awareness?
Well, Esther is 7 years old now, and she was born here in Norway. And we didn't know until a few months after she was born that she was deaf. And I actually remember when I first realized that this was a real possibility. We'd already been to some hearing tests for her, and she had failed those, and we were just kind of told maybe it's a little fluid in her ears, that sort of thing, but we didn't know for sure. But I remember my wife's parents came over for dinner one night, and as they came in the door, there was a sudden loud noise. Something was dropped, and I was holding Esther at the time, and she did not budge. You would think a baby would be startled by such a loud noise. It didn't bother her at all. And that's kind of when it first hit me that she was fully deaf. And so that was a shock because we didn't have any family members that were deaf on either side. So it was a journey that started then. And Esther received cochlear implants when she was 9 months old. And if you're not sure what cochlear implants are, they're kind of like advanced hearing aids, except they contain an implant that goes into what's called the cochlea, which is kind of like the snail house inside the ear. And it brings sound from outside our heads through that cochlea and delivers it to the brain nerves. So with that amazing technology, Esther is now able to hear and communicate very clearly. And she's at 7 years old. She can speak clearly in Norwegian and translate it to English. She's been able to do that since she was like 3 years old. And we're all learning sign language. Right now it's Norwegian sign language, but we're all learning sign language together. And it's such a beautiful language to learn. And so early in the process of learning sign language, I just realized that there really wasn't much out there for families of deaf children. There weren't that many books out there, especially. And as a print designer, I felt like this was sort of an area that I could go into. And I wanted to provide a book that other families could find value in. And so Ada and the Helpers features a character with cochlear implants. It's a fox. Her hearing aids look a little different than Esther's do, but it's just a heartwarming story about helping others. And along the way, there's a word on each spread in the book that is spelled out using the ASL alphabet. So it teaches the ASL alphabet. And I can show you quickly the hardcover. the dust jacket comes off. It's a American Sign Language for those of you who aren't familiar with that.
So
And that's another thing, like most people don't realize that every country has their own sign language. It's not just by language, like English language, but it's every country. So even British Sign Language is very different from American Sign Language or Australian Sign Language or, different things. So that's been
interesting. I
a
never knew
process.
that. That's a great piece of information.
Yeah, so we've been learning Norwegian Sign Language because we live here in Norway, and we're in the process of possibly, maybe in the future, moving to back to the U.S. And we know some natural American Sign Language, and we know the alphabet, but we're not very fluent in ASL at all. So that's something that we'll be learning in the future.
Such an interesting topic. And you were talking about the implants. Does she still has the implants and
Right.
she will have that for the rest of her life?
As long as she chooses to, yes. Now, there may come a point where she decides she doesn't want them and she wants to live the fully deaf life, and that's completely fine if she chooses to do that. Because she's had them since she was a baby, the likelihood of that might be pretty low. But these implants, they have an outer hearing aid component that works just like other hearing aids, basically. And she takes them off at night. She sleeps without
Mm.
them. She takes showers without them, things like that. So it's not a permanent 24 fix, if I can
Uh,
say that. We still need sign language to communicate with her at times.
Your second book, Never Ever Build a Blanket Fort, takes a very different and fun approach by blending imagination and biblical themes. What inspired you to connect the armor of God with such a playful concept, and how do you hope it resonates with young readers? Because everybody has their beliefs, everybody's different, but I'm a Christian, and I wasn't when I met my husband. And so I grew up Catholic. There's so many different religions, but I love the subject of the armor of God because I think we all need that.
Absolutely. I think there's the Christian market for books is huge. I actually worked in two Christian bookstores throughout my career, and I really loved that industry and that niche, if you want to call it that. And I think it's a massive audience. And traditionally, or I would say historically, as a designer, when I look at things in the Christian market, I just felt so disappointed because I felt like it really wasn't done to the best quality. Now that has really improved over the years, but just to be able to produce something that is high quality for Christian families that they can use with their kids, I think it's fantastic. And my book is actually not, the focus is not the armor of God or anything biblical. The focus is really about using their imagination. And so the whole story is about a brother and sister who are building a blanket fort, and suddenly in their imaginations this blanket fort starts to transform into a castle, and they need to defend this castle against their adversaries, which just happen to be their stuffed animals who have come to life in their imaginations. And so it's just a really fun, imaginative story. And I wanted to use it. First of all, my wife told me I needed to write something for my son after writing something for my daughter. So that was part of it, but also just something to encourage kids to get off their screens,
Yes.
and
Mm.
get active with their hands and build things and use their imaginations. And that's kind of the whole premise behind the book and the whole series that I'm working on.
Oh,
But in the process, I saw how well it naturally connected with the armor of God because they
hmm.
builds their courage. And so that's just a sort of a fun way to really make it a faith-based story without necessarily being a faith-based story, if I can say that. Like it's just kind
Yes.
of a tie-in, nice tie-in.
And I think kids need that encouragement for imagination. I think it's too easy to put a tablet in front of them. I've had this conversation over and over again. But to use your imagination to go well beyond our world, my grandson and I connect a lot like that. His imagination is so wild and crazy, and he's helped me with Secrets of Hawthorne Manor and gives me a little bit of a foundation. My grandkids love to get involved in that. And I'm always asking them, I mean, what better way to ask the young readers in today's world, what are you looking for? What do you want to read? I think more encouragement, the better.
That's exactly right.
You've managed to weave powerful messages of faith, imagination, and exclusivity into your stories. How do you approach storytelling when tackling meaningful topics like disability or biblical principles? Do you sit down, Travis, and say, I'm going to write about this? Or give us a little bit of background on how you write, because I have a story idea, but I always like to create the characters first, and then the story is built around the characters. Do you write the manuscript first and then bring in the characters, or give us a little bit of that creativity background when you write?
Ada and the Helpers was definitely developed with the end goal in mind, and that was to bring awareness to hearing loss and sign language and these things. And so I developed Ada because it's very much a story based on the character itself. So she was really developed first. Now, on the other hand, Never Ever Build a Blanket Fort was kind of the opposite of that. It was more about the journey and the imagination and building a story around that, and from an entertainment level rather than an educational or value level. It was for the fun of it. And it's two very different ways of writing. And I would say that I've sort of developed and evolved since the beginning with Ada and the Helpers. And I would say that now, with all the research I've done and with all the authors I've worked with, I think picture books especially should be written from an entertainment first basis. There should always be a balance of entertainment and education, but I don't think picture books necessarily need to be educational. They should really be entertaining first. If you think about textbooks for children, wouldn't they enjoy reading them so much better if they were also entertaining and not just
Right.
educational? Actually I read an article by HarperCollins UK just a couple of months ago that said that 40% of the Gen Z parents say that reading to their kids is not fun anymore. And a lot of that has to do with the idea of reading, or the attachment of reading being with learning. And so there's no enjoyment, there's no fun in it anymore. And I think we need to bring
Mm.
that back, especially as authors. We need to bring back that entertainment value to our books for kids.
I agree with that. And tell me a little more about your thoughts on rhyming. That brings up a great subject of entertainment. The rhyming of it is almost like you're singing da 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 da. And so it's entertaining. I feel like some books are not entertaining as far as illustration. Are they big? Are they bold? Are the characters fun? What are they doing? 75% of my books are rhyming. I think it's because it's so fun. And then the illustrators, I give a little of outline for the illustrators to get an idea. But overall, Daria creates, and I think she's a great creator for fun first. When I started working with her, she has a little boy. Now he's probably quite a few years older, but I'm sure she knows exactly what her son liked. That's part of the connection too. But I have to say that I didn't wake up one day and say, I want to write an educational book. It's like some of the stories are by accident. I feel like they just happen, they just flow when you're creative. And then, secondary, there is that educational side to it. I'm in a family of teachers. My instinct is this is to have a teaching moment in it. I think that's why I fell in love with rhyme, is it's just so much more entertaining.
Well, I think we can bring a lot of value to picture books without them being educational. And like you said, if it's a rhyming book, there are a lot of different ways that you can make books more enjoyable for the adults that are reading them. And rhyming and meter is one of those ways because, like you said, it's kind of this singing voice, and it's more enjoyable to read out loud maybe than just reading prose. And so there are different ways that you can make books more enjoyable for adults to read out loud. And as I was kind of chewing on this article that I read, there were two things that really stuck out to my mind that we as authors need to focus on. We need to help adults build a connection and a conversation with kids. And we also need to help them build imagination. I don't think either one of those requires education. It just requires value.
And interesting that you bring that up. I'm sure you bring that into coaching when you get a manuscript and sharing. But that's interesting about that article. I'm going to jump back to that article. It's completely different from my age group when I grew up, and even my parents. I didn't grow up with picture books in the home. Although I did read to my daughter, I read to grandkids. I just think that there's so much more to being an author than just saying, oh, I got this idea, I'm going to publish a book.
Yeah, and that's, probably from, say, your generation to these younger generations below us, where, the traditional publishers, they say don't write a picture book with more than 500 words. But when you look at some of these classic children's books, they have much more than 500 words. And I still think kids can appreciate that. If it flows well, it's a good, engaging story. Take the Berenstain Bears series, for example. Like some of those books, I think probably every one of them are over 1,000 words, and some of them are closer to 2,000. And my kids wanted them read one after another when they were
Oh my gosh.
toddlers, very young children. And so I think kids can still handle that. So that's one area where generations have changed, like you said. But I think we can challenge kids a bit more than maybe what we think we can.
Absolutely. It breaks my heart when I'm at a farmer's market and a parent, I was just at one on Saturday, and a parent says, my baby's too young for a book, or my
No,
child, that's too long. My response was, well, read them 1 or 2 pages and let it rest, or talk about what you've learned, or the illustrations are so big and bold. I think it's so sad that a parent limits the learning no matter what age it is.
exactly right. Books are so valuable and they should be read from babies on up.
Absolutely. You're now writing a new book called Indie Author Dozen. And I looked up the dozen. I've got a couple of questions. I'm going to let you explain the dozen to us, because I think most authors, especially seasoned authors that have been writing for a long time, we try to, and I haven't been writing that long, but I like to get as much for my money. So a book designer may do the formatting. Quite honestly, Travis, I have not had good luck with beta readers. You get 10 beta readers and you've got 10 opinions.
Well, JoAnn, the first thing I want to share with the person who's watching or listening to this is you have a story to tell. And believe it or not, about 80% of Americans believe they have a book in them to write. But I would be afraid to know the percentage of those people who actually sit down and start writing, because I imagine it's extremely low. But even for those who start their manuscript, only about 3 to 8% of them actually finish the manuscript. And
Wow.
those who finish it, only about 20% will go on to publish it.
Oh my
So
God.
it is an extremely small category of people in the US who actually go from, yeah, I want to write a book, to writing a book and publishing it. And I think a lot of that is fear. And so that's really what's behind the Indie Authors Dozen. I want to help people overcome that fear and be confident in their story and find the clarity that they need to move on through every step in the process to publishing, whether it's self-publishing or traditional publishing, and get their book out there, get their story out there, and be successful at it. And so the Indie Authors Dozen, which that's a working title, but I think it's pretty solid at this point. It's all about helping the author get from that manuscript to a published book. And when I first started writing it and it came with a different title, then it was more like the step-by-step process of publishing. And what I realized was the steps are really in opposite order of what you may think. And what I mean by that is a lot of people will, especially children's book authors, they will write their manuscript and then they say, oh, I need pictures, so I need to hire an illustrator. And so they do that. And then the illustrations are done. They say, well, I need somebody to put this all together if the illustrator's not doing it. So I need a designer. And then, okay, now I need to have this book printed, or I need to publish it on Amazon or whatever. but really the steps are backwards. We need to be thinking more about, okay, how are we going to publish this book? What printer are we going to use? And hire a designer to help you with the process of making sure that your illustrator then has the necessary templates so that everything comes together. And so the Indie Authors Dozen is really about building your team as a publisher, as an author. In fact, I'm going to give you a little secret here. I think there's no such thing as self-publishing, because that word self
Makes
in
sense.
there, it has this correlation of doing it all yourself, do it yourself publishing. And that's not what we're in business to do. So that's why I use Indie Authors Dozen. I use that very purposefully, because as an indie author, as an independent author, yeah, you're separate from the traditional way of publishing, but you still need a team. You still need to develop a team that is competent in what they do and will champion you in your book and support you and help you get to the finish line. And so that's really what the Indie Authors Dozen is all about. It's putting a team together, what I call the dozen, because there's a dozen different seats in the room. And they range from you as the author, and actually you kind of fill multiple roles. You're the author, you're the publisher, you're the self-editor. There's also other people in the room that are going to help you as volunteers, or even I even include the audience as one of the members of the dozen, because you can't publish a book without an audience. You need them. And then there's also the professionals that help you, the designer like myself, the illustrator, the printer, and all these different things. So it's bringing all these people into the room to really help you and champion you across the finish line.
I agree with that. I think it's because when I started with a traditional publisher, I hired an author coach to train me. I trained with Stacy Bauer and took every class she had. She was so knowledgeable. Really, she was the only person that I knew that I felt like her and I really connected. And she took me through those step by step. And I've always said self-publishing, I've got a whole team behind me. And you have to have that team to help you, because I'm not a designer. I can't format my own book. I can't print it. Those are all different, that you need an expert for those. The editor, I have been so blessed to find Robin Katz early in my career. She's so amazingly talented. I don't know if you got a chance to listen to my podcast with her. She is a phenomenal metering expert, but there's so much more to editing. What you're doing, Travis, to handhold and guide somebody through something, and you just don't know who to trust. And so it's really important to find those people that you can trust, that have experience like yourself, to find somebody that has the background in being an indie author. And I love the hype man, because when that step of the launch team, I fumbled through my launches most of the time. Kickstarter, it's so much work, as you know. And I don't know if anybody knows what Kickstarter is, but it is, you're promoting your book before it's out. You're getting pre-orders to help you print or help you with the cost of it. But that in itself is like writing a manuscript and getting it published. I mean, it's just so much to it. You need that hype man, because there's so many highs and lows that you're going through. And publishing a book, Travis, I don't know about you, but I have been able to publish 4 months is pretty quick, but 6 months, sometimes 12 months. My chapter books are a lot longer because it takes longer to write. And when you really break it down, there's so much more. I can't tell you how many indie authors ask me a simple question: what do I do first? There's no short answer. I think I've given that to somebody before. Well, there's no short answer to this. Share with any information on all of that I just shared about my own experience. It was a lot.
Well, you're exactly right. I think the most common question I see from first-time authors is, I just finished a manuscript. Now what? What's next? And that is such an open-ended question. But my answer now is, first, celebrate. go out to dinner and, have a drink, whatever. And second is start building your team because you need that. And you mentioned the hype man. I love the hype man. And I just wanted to explain that a little bit for those who are listening, because you may not understand that term. I grew up listening to Christian music, but of all subgenres. But one special subgenre of Christian music that I enjoyed was rap. And I do not fit that stereotype at all, but I enjoyed it. And when you listen to a rapper always has a hype man, and it's kind of like their backup singer, you might say. The hype man's job is to get the audience excited and get them buzzing and just, get them excited for the rapper. And then their second job is that when the rapper needs to stop and catch a breath, the hype man steps in and takes over.
I never knew that.
And if you don't like the term hype man, you could use cheerleader. Of course, launch team is what we use in the book industry, but they all fit sort of that same responsibility. Your launch team is there to help you get your audience excited about your book, and also step in when you just need a break and you need somebody to help you do this, And like you said, marketing a book, that can be a whole other book on its own. But I love that visual of the hype man. And so that's why I included that as part of the dozen. You also mentioned beta readers. That's also one of the members of the dozen that I explained. I've got a whole chapter based on beta readers. And you're right. If it's very easy to get very vague general answers from beta readers. And I've learned that the trick is to ask the right questions and to ask very specific questions about your manuscript to get the feedback that you need. In fact, I've got a whole checklist that the watcher can download at launchmissioncreative.com/beta. I think it's on my website, but it's a checklist of, over 40 questions that people can ask their beta read.
That is so much information. When will this book be out? What's your goal launching date on it?
Well, it keeps getting delayed.
Always?
It's taken me much longer to write it than I thought. And actually, May was my goal this past May. And in April, I had a small heart attack. And so that delayed things.
Oh.
So now I'm really getting to the end of the self-editing period now. And so I'm trying to move into I'm going to do a Kickstarter campaign for it. And so I'm hoping maybe near the end of August or sometime in September to launch the crowdfunding campaign.
I'll give you an opportunity for your website in a little bit, because there's a lot of good information, the author website. You mentioned helping authors build their publishing team, from editors to designers to hype man. Why do you think building a team is so essential for an indie author, and how can they start doing right out of the gate? I know that we already talked about a lot of this, but right out of the gate is before you even write a manuscript. Where do people go to find these different people? And I get that asked all the time. Where did you find your editor? Where did you find this person? The obvious answer for me was social media. There's so many groups. Do you have something more? What's your recommendation, Travis?
Well, first of all, you mentioned earlier the word trust, and I think that's extremely important to talk about, because I think the main reason people struggle with the process of indie publishing is trust. They don't know who to trust, and they're not willing to trust their team with the responsibility of championing their book for them. And so that's really the goal behind the Indie Authors Dozen, as well as my coaching. I want to help authors gain trust in their team. And so in doing that, then you begin to build a team that you can trust. You start looking for people who, like I said, are competent. They know what they're doing, and they're not just there to scam you out or anything like that. And there are a lot of different resources for finding team members, depending on who you're looking for. Whether if it's an illustrator, there is an app, and I believe it's also a website called Cara, Cara, which is fairly new, but that's a good place to look for illustrators, and it allows you to sort of filter and search for different types of artwork and illustrators. I've actually used Instagram to find my illustrators just by searching hashtags and looking for illustrators, you can see their artwork right there. And so that's how I've done it. There are a lot of different ways to find your members of your dozen. Maybe the best way is by word of mouth, asking the authors who are successful. Ask friends of yours that you really admire what they've done and books that they've managed to produce, how they found their illustrator or their designer or their beta readers or whoever it may be. Who are they using to print? Different things like that. Look for people who can recommend these different vendors or these different members of your dozen.
Absolutely. It's so hard to build trust, but that is the number one thing. And it really is common sense. You were saying, look for those experienced people. I always get a little nervous to refer people because you never know what that illustrator, what that printer might encounter. Sometimes they have personal life issues, and I had this conversation with a fellow author, a friend of mine, and we both used the same illustrator. And she said, "Do you know what's going on with that person?" And I said, "No. Usually, if you email and text message and come to find out there was a family issue, sometimes that's what it is, regardless of that's who we trust or a printer. Great experience with a printer. I always use the same one because being self-employed and an entrepreneur for almost 40 years now, I am a firm believer in that trust. I build a team, I trust them. You keep those people very close to you and refer them, and they refer you. Once I build a team, it's like it's hard to go outside of that because that's your comfort. So somebody like you, Travis, would be great to hire and trust. It's an investment. I talk about this all the time. My books, each independently, depending on the illustrator and the printer, are the two most expensive, $8,000 to $10,000 a book. And so you are investing a lot of money, and you've got to have that tight team. JoAnn's got a manuscript. It goes to the editor, the beta reader. I've got my illustrator lined up. How far out are you? And then it goes to the book designer. How far out is she? And, things don't always come together. You may want to launch it in May, but not necessarily, because people on your team may take it out a little further. But the investment, you've got to have that tight team around you because that's a lot of money. And at my age, I joke about this. I don't know whether I'm going to get my money back on that investment. It's hard work. You talked about marketing. The marketing piece, you've now invested all that money, and you got to get out there and you've got to do the footwork. You've got to work hard, and you've got a whole nother team for marketing that we all work together to help one another. I feel like we're so blessed, Travis. This indie author industry is really tight. As indie authors, we're very close to one another. I feel so blessed with this podcast and getting people in front of people. I can't tell you what it means to me to be talking to you today, because just texting is not the same as talking one-on-one and learning from each other and building that closer relationship, and our businesses to build those relationships more special.
I absolutely agree. We as authors, we're all in this together. We're not competitors. It's not like somebody's going to buy my book and then not buy your book, or vice versa. They may buy both books as well as 10 others. We're not pitted against each other. We're in here together. We're doing this together. We're trying to figure out how to market our books together and get it to the audiences that we need to reach. And each book, each author has their own niche audience. So yeah, it's fun. It's fun to be on this journey with other authors and to help them along the way. And just going back to the question you asked previously, it's difficult to find these different people to be on your team. And one thing I'm doing as a coach is I'm developing a short list of these different vendors. So I have a short list of editors that I provide. I have a short list of illustrators that I provide and different things like that to help my clients along the way so that they're not just fumbling in the dark and trying to find who to reach. It doesn't mean they have to use my list of illustrators. For example, I do have some requirements that their book does have to be professionally edited. Their book has to be professionally illustrated. They're not allowed to, I'm not going to take on a book that looks like it's done with stock imagery or with AI. I want good quality, high quality books for my clients because I know that if they put together their team well, and if they put together a team that they can trust and trust them, they have the best possibility for success. And so that's the goal.
Absolutely. That is the goal. Travis, share with our audience where they can find you, your website, social media, and if they want to become a beta reader. I signed up on your team. So I'm curious to see how that works out. Hopefully you'll accept me as one, but if you don't, I'm okay with that. Or if you have too many filled in that area and I can be put in a different pocket, that's okay too.
Yeah, JoAnn, you're one of my hype men, my hype women.
Oh, yeah, you can tell. Rah, rah, rah.
All right.
You know, I am so passionate, and I know I can tell you are too, about being an indie author. And that's what gets me excited. That's what gets me up in the morning, is to be that advocate for kids and hopefully put out a great book that the parents will enjoy, teachers will enjoy in their classroom. I am a real estate broker by trade, way too serious, too many angry people. And so writing and being an indie author is so much fun. It is a real passion for me.
Yeah. So anyone can go to my website, launchmissioncreative.com, and there's plenty of links to things there. There's the beta readers link where you can actually download the very first chapter of the book Indie Authors Dozen and get kind of a sneak peek at that first chapter.
Ooh.
And it's not edited, so it's completely raw, but you can read that. And then the ways that I serve my clients are, I have a book audit that I offer where I just go through your manuscript or your book and I give you a step-by-step critique based on a formula that I've developed called the primer formula. And there's 6 different categories that I look at for that book audit, and I just show you ways that you can improve your manuscript or your book. I also offer one-on-one coaching. I've got some future ideas, some group coaching and things like that in mind too. But there's also the book design, so I offer that as well. LaunchMissionCreative.com. I'm on all the social media channels at Launch Mission, so you can find me there, except for TikTok. I'm not on TikTok.
Neither am I. I found you just by running a search, Travis Peterson, because I always like to see where else are you popping up that I can find more information. So that's kind of my tip behind the scenes is you can also find Travis D. Peterson. Travis, it has been fabulous talking to you and becoming hopefully a good long-term friend and fellow indie author. You've given us a lot of great information. Go check out his website because his books are there. There's a lot of information that you can learn about Travis and more information about indie authors as well. Thanks so much, Travis, and for chatting with us.
Thank you, JoAnn. It's been a pleasure to be here.
Thanks so much for joining me today on Beyond the Book with JoAnn Dickinson. If you enjoyed this episode, don't forget to give a thumbs up, subscribe to the channel, and hit the bell icon so you never miss a new interview. If you'd like to learn more about today's guest or grab a copy of their book, check the links in the description below. And if you're an aspiring author or a fan of children's books and storytelling, I'd love for you to follow along as I share new episodes, tips, and behind the scenes insight every week. Until next time, keep dreaming, keep writing, and see you back here at Beyond the Book.